Rejection is something almost every human being encounters at some point in life. It doesn't matter who you are, whether from a loved one, a close friend, a social group, or even within your own family. The sting of being ignored or pushed away is universal. At first glance, this type of pain seems strangely overwhelming. Why can something as small as an unanswered text, a declined invitation, or an ignored word feel so devastating, as if a piece of our very being is being torn apart? Most psychological explanations reduce this to issues of self-esteem or insecurity, but Carl Gustav Jung looked much deeper. For Jung, the agony of rejection is not confined to the present moment. Instead, it awakens something far older, far deeper, something buried within the archetypal layers of the human psyche. When someone rejects us, we are not simply reacting to what just happened, we are unconsciously reliving every past moment where exclusion symbolized danger, abandonment, or emotional death. What we truly feel is the reopening of an ancient wound, the fear of being left helpless, invisible, and alone. This fear originates in childhood, when acceptance from our parents or caregivers was literally tied to survival. That is why rejection cuts so sharply. It doesn't just feel like being turned away, it feels like being erased. Jung described this recurring phenomenon as the abandonment complex, a collection of memories, emotions, and automatic responses deeply rooted in the unconscious. These forces operate like invisible programs, pulling emotional triggers beyond our rational control. Suddenly, we are no longer adults, we are the wounded child once again. But Jung noticed something even more unsettling. The people who suffer most intensely from rejection are often those who have built their entire identity around pleasing others. They wear what he called a dependent persona, a carefully constructed social mask designed to avoid conflict, secure love, and ensure approval. And when that mask is rejected, the wound is not just emotional, it feels existential. It seems as though their very existence has been denied. Why? Because behind the mask, there was never a firmly grounded self, only a performance. And here lies the key point. Rejection is not merely an external problem, it is a mirror, reflecting the unresolved pieces of our inner world. It forces us to confront our shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we fear are unworthy of love, the traits we try to suppress. And ironically, this confrontation is where the possibility of transformation lies. For Jung, every form of suffering carries within it an invitation. Rejection, however cruel, can become the starting point for psychological liberation if we are willing to walk through the pain and truly face what it reveals. In this video, we'll journey through these ideas step by step. We'll explore why rejection triggers the abandonment complex, how the dependent persona traps us in cycles of pain, and why only by facing the shadow can we become free. It won't be an easy path, but it is the only one that leads to individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, beyond the endless craving for external acceptance. Because in the end, the deepest wound is not being rejected by others, it is the rejection of ourselves. Carl Jung observed that the events which shake us most are not necessarily the most dramatic in themselves. Instead, they are the ones that awaken deeply rooted emotional structures formed early in life. Rejection is one of the strongest triggers of these hidden structures. When someone excludes us, ignores us, or breaks a bond, it is rarely just about that single moment. What's really happening is that a much older psychic content is being activated, what Jung called the abandonment complex. Think of this complex as an open wound that never healed. It forms in early childhood through experiences of neglect, rejection, or subtle abandonment. For the child, being rejected by caregivers is not interpreted as a social inconvenience. It feels like a threat to existence itself. A child is utterly dependent. If their parents withdraw love or approval, it is experienced as life-threatening. Although time passes, these experiences do not simply disappear. Instead, they sink below consciousness, becoming part of an underground emotional system that waits to be triggered whenever adult life mirrors those earlier conditions. Jung referred to this as a complex constellation. Something small, like being left on red, being passed over for a promotion, or being abandoned by a partner, can unleash a powerful emotional chain reaction. The reaction feels disproportionate, not because we are weak or immature, but because something much deeper has been touched. Once activated, the complex hijacks our rational mind. It bends our perception, drives impulsive reactions, and traps us in desperation. We may become clingy, hostile, withdrawn, or even self-sabotaging. At that point, we are not really reacting to the person in front of us. We are battling ghosts from our own past. The tragedy is that many people live their entire lives under the grip of this pattern, trying desperately to avoid rejection without ever realizing they are repeating an unconscious script. But the abandonment complex doesn't work alone. It ties itself to another layer of the psyche that Jung explored in depth, the persona. In order to survive rejection, many people unconsciously develop what Jung called a dependent persona. The persona in Jung's model is the social mask we wear to interact with the outside world. In moderation, it is essential. We all adapt ourselves to society. But the danger arises when the persona becomes the only identity we know, suffocating the true self. The dependent persona is a distorted version of this mask. It grows from the belief that one's worth depends entirely on pleasing others. A child who learns that obedience, politeness, and constant good behavior bring approval may internalize the message, "I will only be loved if I am what others want me to be." Over time, this belief becomes automatic, turning into an entire identity built on external validation. These individuals avoid conflict, bend themselves to every environment, and seek constant approval. This is not vanity, it is survival. Deep down, they fear that if they stop performing, they will be discarded and forgotten. But here's the paradox. This mask doesn't shield them from pain. It actually intensifies it. Because when this mask is rejected, the rejection doesn't hit a surface. It strikes at the very core of identity. If you only know yourself through others' acceptance, then every rejection feels like total annihilation. People trapped in this state live in constant emotional vigilance, scanning every silence, every look, every pause as potential signs of being unloved. When rejection inevitably happens, it collapses not just the mask, but the fragile identity hiding behind it. And yet there is a deeper dimension still, because once the persona cracks, another force emerges, the shadow. When rejection tears through the dependent persona, the shadow rises to the surface. For Jung, the shadow includes everything we deny in ourselves, emotions, impulses, and desires we bury because we fear they make us unlovable. The more we try to hide them, the stronger they grow in the unconscious. This is why rejection feels so brutal. It doesn't just remind us of loss, it awakens the hidden belief that something is wrong with me. The thought is rarely logical. It is the echo of the shadow. Rejection seems like proof that we are fundamentally flawed, unworthy, or unlovable. And the more we suppress the shadow, the more destructive its return becomes. Anger erupts as rage. Sadness deepens into despair. Envy, shame, or vindictiveness surface in distorted ways. These reactions are not random. They are the shadow demanding to be acknowledged. Rejection acts like a cracked mirror. It shows us distorted fragments of who we are, parts we never wanted to face. But Jung's insight was profound. The shadow is not the enemy. It is in fact made up of everything we abandoned in ourselves in the desperate search for approval. Our buried anger, suppressed ambition, unspoken sadness, genuine desires, all live in the shadow. When rejection happens, life is, in a way, giving us an opportunity, painful but necessary, to reclaim these lost parts. But this requires more than intellectual awareness. We must be willing to confront the feelings, trace them back to their roots, and allow them into consciousness. Jung famously said, "What you need most will be found where you least want to look." That is exactly why rejection, while cruel, can become a gateway to psychological liberation. Yet this threshold demands something more, building a foundation of worth that no longer depends on the acceptance of others. From childhood, we are conditioned to see acceptance as the currency of survival. Approval brings rewards. Disapproval threatens punishment or neglect. Slowly, we internalize the illusion that our worth depends on external validation. Jung warned about this in The Undiscovered Self. Modern society, with its institutions and systems, pressures individuals to conform, to become statistics, consumers, replaceable parts of a machine. In such a world, validation is not just desired, it feels mandatory. The tragedy is that external approval is unstable. 1,000 compliments can be undone by a single criticism. Today's admiration can become tomorrow's indifference. And as long as identity depends on this, we remain fragile, constantly afraid of being discarded. This is the invisible prison of the dependent persona. Living to please others means abandoning authenticity, and the exhaustion of constantly performing eventually leaves one hollow inside. But Jung pointed toward an exit, the development